It's been going on for a while, last 6 or 7 months. We've had three teammates in particular at the clinic depart ways, and not like in a bad way that was, there was bad blood or it was a performance issue. It was like their life was taking them in a different direction, and they determined that it was, they weren't going to be part of the team anymore, which is always a difficult conversation to have. I think a lot of times as a leader, sometimes we get this idea in our minds that there's a team member leaves and it's something I did wrong. Like, what did I fail to do? Was I a bad boss? Did I, not pay them enough? Did I not provide them with enough opportunity? What was it? And I think that's one of the things that happens. But I've always tried very, very heavily to have like this very open relationship with my team members, where it is more of, employment in my mind is not so much you're doing a job for me and this team, and that's great, like you're contributing to the organization, but every opportunity to join a team or to work together is really two discerning professionals deciding whether or not there's a fit between the priorities and the goals of each and the skills that they each bring to the table, and whether it makes sense to continue a working relationship. And sometimes that doesn't change for years or decades, right? And sometimes it changes rather quickly. And a lot of the ones recently we've had at the team, it's like, listen, the conversation I just had a couple weeks with a therapist was like, listen, my wife and I are considering starting a family. You have a health share here. The hospital will let me come on full time for 6 months, get full benefits, and then I can come back PRN after that and retain my full benefits. And I told him, I was like, listen, I would be a bad boss if I told you to stay and work with me, because it's clearly, this is one of those opportunities that is just going to be better for you and your family in the long run. So
Yeah.
I do feel like as a leader, your primary responsibility for the people that you're leading is to really look out for what's best for them. And sometimes that means they're on your team. Sometimes it means they're not. But I think you're getting more goodwill in the workplace than going the other way around,
Well, in a similar vein too, I think this kind of topic is so difficult to talk about because, like I said, it's taboo. Nobody really wants to talk about it. But the other reason it's kind of difficult too is because it people forget there are better ways to handle this too. Like we had an employee that we had to part ways with. I'm mixing up dates now, but let's just call it within the last 3 months or so. And the conversation ultimately boiled down to like, hey, look, this isn't working, but like we're all feeling the same way, and let's handle this with kindness. And hey, because and we don't have any like strict policies around like termination notices and all that stuff, but I was just kind of like, look, why don't we just pay for another month of salary if that'll help like soften the blow. But the point is, like, you can have these conversations through with kindness as well, especially if it's not going well. Like your example is like, I think, one of those scenarios where the employee's already decided that they're going to part ways, and
Yeah.
the examples you gave of your previous managers was that they were looking out for you, and now you're carrying that out forward with your businesses as well, right? Like where you're treating these people with respect. I guess what I'm trying to say in a poorly articulated way is that the same can be said about when you have to part ways because maybe the role isn't working out or the
Yeah.
person isn't working out or whatever. It's an interesting, to me, I find these topics interesting because, like, again, nobody really talks about this stuff. Like, everything that's like all the business advice online is like,
Yeah. Managing your
I don't know.
performa and your metrics and financials,
Yeah.
but what happens when
Yeah.
Bob isn't being productive?
Right. Yeah. Right, exactly. It's like, because and it's all like the hard skills. Hey, here's how you make that P&L, or here's how you do whatever. But nobody wants to talk about what it's like when you're standing there looking somebody in the eye. And I don't know how, I won't put you on the spot, but I know for me, like, I feel an obligation to not only them, but their families as well, but then also to the rest of the team. And so it's this balance of like, okay, how do we handle this with kindness, but with respect to all the people that are affected by this?
Yeah, you want to be human in the way you do it, but the reality is like the I can't remember who said this and what business book I read, but it was like A performers don't want to work with C performers, so you're doing the team a disservice by keeping them on. I've always taken the position that like, a team member should never be surprised if you have a conversation that results in you
Yeah.
terminating
Yeah.
them, right? I think a lot of like the angst and stuff that people feel about it is like, well, we just haven't had clear expectations the entire relationship. And now it's finally devolved to the point where we've got to fire you, like maybe it's my past role in the federal government where they were big on like performance improvement plans and check-ins and all that. But like I'm always talking with my clinicians about it. We're having this conversation. And if anybody does dip down into a place where they're not having, whatever, they're not meeting whatever benchmark or standard, like we're having a conversation. Like this is the plan. I expect it to improve, over the next 3 months. If not, we're gonna be having another conversation.
I don't know how to ask this question, but I remember for me, going through my own sort of like professional development. I don't know when it dawned on me that in the role that you and I are in, leading our respective companies, we can kind of change the rules. Meaning, like
Yeah.
nobody ever really said, "Hey, the severance for an employee has to be 2 weeks, or it has to be 3 weeks, or it has to be whatever it is." I don't know when it dawned on me that like we could just do whatever we felt was
Yeah.
right. And even
Yeah.
if it meant like, hey, listen, this isn't working out. Today is your last day, but we will pay you for another month. I don't know when that just randomly appeared in my head where I'm like, oh, wait, I can make it, I can do that. Cause I remember a long time ago, I just felt awkward about it. It's like, hey, listen, this isn't working out. And, how about next Friday's your last day? And that's where payroll. And I just thought that's what I was supposed to do. And then I think one day I was just like, "Oh, I guess I can just make the rules." Um, so, are there other like tactics or things like that where that you've picked up over the years as you're dealing with like retention or retaining or parting ways with employees?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. A big one, you kind of nailed it on the head at the beginning there. Like, I think, like, if you've made the decision to terminate somebody, it does not do any good to keep them around for 2 or 3 weeks because that at that point, like, they're basically doing nothing because they know their job is over. And then there's always a chance that like just like negative conversations happen and it sows resentment and all that kind of stuff. So I'm a big fan of like now's like the times that I've had to terminate somebody because it wasn't working out. It was like we had a conversation at 8 in the morning. They were gone by 8:30. Sure, we paid them. There was some severance involved, but it was like it just doesn't. It's not going to do you any good. It's not going to do me any good. It's going to like drag the whole team down for the next 3 weeks. Like, why don't you just go start applying for jobs, start doing what you need to do. You'll still have money for a couple weeks, whatever. I think that's
It's
one of the
probably
big ones.
more. It's more. I would imagine it's even more important at the clinic level because especially if it's a clinician, anyways, where they're seeing patients. It's
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, that thing you talked about there, you mentioned sort of that I think is kind of uncomfortable but real is like those negative conversations could be with other employees. It could also be with patients, and that neither of those things is good.
If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo.